think about it. How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling like you didn't really connect? Or maybe you thought you got all the details, but there was still something missing. I'm here to tell you that the problem likely wasn't in what you said, but in what you asked. Today we're diving into one of the most underrated yet game-changing skills you can ever develop, asking the right questions. Not the answers you give, but the questions you ask. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and take a deep breath if you're in your car, because by the end of this episode, you're going to know how to use questions to unlock deeper connections, gain clarity, and even win people over. And trust me, it's simpler than you think. Plus, I'm going to sprinkle in some stories from my own life because we all love a good story, right? Let's get into it. All right, let me start by telling you about this time when I was still new in the corporate life. It looks like centuries ago, but yeah, it's still fresh in my memories. It was my first client meeting. And this was in Pune. And we were meeting Tetra Pak, big organization. I was all buttoned up in my sharpest suit, notebook in hand, ready to impress, with 2 pens just in case one didn't work. And the meeting started. My colleague was outlining this huge project. Everyone was nodding, throwing out ideas. My boss, he hadn't arrived. His flight had gotten delayed. So there was more pressure on me. I was furiously writing down every detail. I wanted to contribute so badly. And all I could think of is, don't mess it up, Sarika. Don't mess it up. It's your first meeting, first impression. Now my boss always seemed to have the perfect thing to say. And midway into the meeting, he slid in quietly and sat next to me. Started looking at my notes. And patiently, quietly listening to the person who was speaking. And that time it was the client, the manager from Tetra Pak, who was giving the presentation. The project was about packing sugarcane juice in a Tetra Pak. And my boss, a very mature businessman, gently and very curiously asked, "Can we clarify a few points for me? What is the ultimate goal of this project? Is it customer-friendly packaging or nutrient retention or shelf life? Because that changes the game. Because cost of packaging is as it is 4 times the cost of the product." The room was quiet. Most people looked like they hadn't thought of the question themselves. The conversation completely shifted. Instead of throwing out random ideas, everybody was now focused on what actually mattered. And all this while no one in the room other than our team who was the person asking the question, knew who was asking the questions. And in the breakout room, I remember there were whispers doing the rounds. Who's that guy who was asking that rally of questions? That guy standing over there? That day, I realized asking the right question can be way more powerful than giving the right answer. It's not just about looking smart. It's about seeking clarity, it's about making people think, and it's about steering conversations in the right direction. But do you know why asking the right questions changes the game? I asked this question in one of my trainings, and among the other answers, I remember someone said, "Because questions make you think." Of course, indeed. Questions open doors that statements just can't. When you ask someone a thoughtful question, you're not just collecting information. You're inviting them to share their perspective and even share their expertise or self-reflect. So when you're asking the right question, number 1, you're clarifying information. Like, remember my boss's question? It stops everyone from going off track. A well-placed question can also build relationships. Because when you ask someone a personal question, you're showing curiosity. It also shows that you care about them. And a well-placed question can inspire creative thinking. The right question can help people think in ways they never would have thought on their own. Now, communication is all about connecting, right? So whether you're at work or in your personal life, asking the right questions can change the way you connect with others. We'll dig deeper into this in the next segment. My daughter, Sarah, when she was 10, getting her to open up about school, or for that matter, anything else, could feel like you're trying to crack the code to a vault. I would say, "How was school, Sarah?" And she would answer, "Nice." If she had gone to a birthday party, I was obviously curious, like a normal parent. How did it go? How many kids came? What games did you play? How was the cake? What did kids love? Etc., etc. But every single time I'd asked, "How was the party?" the answer was, "Nice." I knew something was off when she seemed a little down. But my regular questions were not getting me anywhere. So I knew something had to change. My questions had to change. My strategy had to change. One evening, I sat down next to her and I simply asked, "What was the best part of your day today?" Her eyes lit up and she started talking about this project they were doing in the art class. She talked non-stop. There was no nice answer. There was a long, lengthy, debatable answer. That one little change from a generic question to a specific one flipped the switch. I was able to connect with her. I was able to learn what was really going on in her life, and I was able to understand whether she really needed some support any time. So the lesson here is asking the right question isn't about interrogating. You can't play cop. It's about unlocking someone's world. Do you struggle with this too? Because you can use the technique which I'm going to share with friends, partners, co-workers, just anyone. Instead of asking, "How are you? How are you?" which often gets an answer, "I'm good, I'm fine, couldn't be better." Why don't you ask, "What has been the highlight of your day?" You will see the difference instantly. You'll hear much more in the answer than you otherwise would. Now, I've been a communication skills coach for about 25 years and practically breathed a corporate career for about 3 decades. I've coached several clients who struggle with making their meetings more productive. Let me share an example. So there was this one client, Mr. Reddy. He came to me frustrated because every single time he met with his team, he felt like he wasn't getting the full picture. Because he was asking direct questions like, "Did we hit the target? Is it done?" And in response, he would get short, very unhelpful answers. "Yes, sir. No, sir." Mr. Reddy was very disappointed. कोई ठीक से बताता ही नहीं है. They hardly tell me anything. I suggested Mr. Reddy to change his questions from a cop's investigation interview to more open-ended questions. So instead of, "Did we hit the target?" he started to ask, "What challenges did we face in hitting the target this quarter?" That one change of asking an open-ended question completely opened up the conversation. Suddenly his team was talking. They were discussing the real roadblocks. They started giving him insights. These insights he'd never gotten before. The beauty of open-ended questions is that they encourage people to explain, to elaborate, to think critically. It takes a conversation from surface level to meaningful. Try asking an open-ended questions, a subjective type of question rather than an objective question, and experience this yourself. While you practice this, we learn some do's and don'ts on how to start asking better questions. Where? In the next segment. A client of mine, Abhijit Kelkar, and I'm taking his name with his permission, Abhijit, he was struggling with his business partner. They'd hit a wall in their collaboration, and this tension was now affecting their projects. They both felt like they weren't being heard, they had endless arguments, unproductive arguments. In our coaching session, I suggested Abhijit that he switch from trying to defend his position to asking questions. the right questions. So when Abhijit wanted to ask his partner, "Why don't you agree with me?" he didn't say, "Why don't you agree with me?" Instead, he asked a question. And his question was, "How do you think we can move forward from here?" See the difference? "Why don't you agree with me?" "How do you think we can move forward from here?" Interestingly, this changed the entire dynamics. That question opened up a space for them, a space to solve the problem together rather than argue. So they reconnected, all because Abhijit had learned to ask the right questions. So when you have to ask a question, I would suggest remember 3 rules. Let me share the rule number 1. So when I say rule number 1, you ask specific but not leading questions. Let me explain. A couple of years ago, I worked with a new agency that was suggesting a new packaging design for my food company. Just to fill in, I'm also the CEO of a leading food brand in India, a baby I totally love. So between that agency who was doing our designing and our in-house team of designers again, there was a conflict of sorts. The ideas weren't aligned. Both teams had talent, both teams were creative, but the brainstorming sessions went nowhere. It was a classic, "Now the ball's in your court, the blame's yours to take," that kind of a scene. They were random playing in the dark questions like, shouldn't we just go for a minimalistic look? Shouldn't the colors stand out on the shelves? Shouldn't the materials be eco-friendly? Now these questions are loaded. They're nudging everyone towards nothing. These questions make everyone imagine 10,000 things and ideas and all inconclusive. So basically, add to the confusion. Someone asked a simple question. Someone from the marketing side. And that question was, what's the one feature of our packaging that you think customers will interact with most? Now, to design the packaging, this got everyone thinking. It led to a deep dive into how the packaging felt in the consumer's hands. Now, the questions they were asking each other were more inviting. They were more open-ended, like what elements in the design are working, which ones need improvement. The small tweak changed everything. Once they started asking clear, open-ended questions without guiding the answers, the room lit up. People felt more empowered to share honest feedback, and the conversations became richer. They started discussing materials, color palettes, even customers' tactile experience, and this led to a complete redesign that eventually became the brand's standout feature. So instead of asking broad questions like, how's everything going? Try something more specific. Again, specific but not leading. Instead of, how's everything going? Try asking, what's the one thing you're excited about in this project? Remember, it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation, and a conversation is a connection. So don't lose the connection. The goal is to open doors for someone to share without you putting the words in their mouth. If you don't want to get one-word answers, don't ask those yes or no type of questions, especially when you need depth. I remember once I was working with a group of high school students. They were preparing for an international debate competition. They had all the knowledge, all the enthusiasm, but they struggled with engaging their audience. It felt like they were rattling off facts, rehearsed arguments, but there was no depth in the conversation. I watched their practice session and realized they were stuck in a habit of asking closed questions like, do you agree? Or is this right? So I challenged them to flip their approach. How? By asking open-ended questions. Instead of saying, do you agree? I had them try, what do you think about this issue? Or how would this change affect your community? The difference in the response of the audience was immediate. Suddenly, the debates went from sounding like lectures to being real conversations. And these students weren't just waiting for their turn to speak. They were listening, they were reacting, and they were building off each other's ideas. So try asking, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? Or how did you approach blah, blah, blah? It gives people the space to provide fuller answers, powerful answers, thoughtful answers. Let them fill the blanks. You don't fill it for them. Let's say you're asking great questions, okay? But asking great questions is going to work only and only if you really, really listen to the answers. I once asked a friend how he was holding up after a tough week. And when he started to answer, I was busy thinking about my next question, scribbling on my phone. I missed the subtle hints in his response, that he was feeling overwhelmed, and that it wasn't until later that I realized he needed support that I hadn't given. I was so embarrassed. So when you ask a question, be willing to listen. When you ask a question, make sure you're listening not just to the words, but to the emotions behind them. And when you listen actively, you're actually playing detective in the conversation. You catch all the little clues that people drop. And then you hit them with a perfect follow-up question that digs even deeper. It's all about really tuning in. If you listen well, you'll ask questions that show you're invested and that the other person will appreciate, and slowly he'll open up more. Imagine a patient comes up to a doctor. He's complaining about some recurring headaches. The doctor, as usual, asks routine questions, but actively listens. He notices that the patient subtly mentions extra stress at work, long hours of work, too much work. So instead of brushing past this, the doctor follows up with open-ended questions about stress levels, work environment, sleep habits, and the conversation grows deeper. The doctor uncovers that the headaches are actually stress-related, not just physical. So he recommends a more holistic treatment, including some stress management techniques alongside medication. So without active listening, the doctor would have missed all this, and the treatment would have been less effective. So remember, ask specific but not leading questions. Prefer asking open-ended questions which offer room for a discussion. And finally, listen really, really well when you ask a question, because that should have really driven your response for subsequent questions. All right, friends, I hope you're starting to see just how powerful asking the right questions can be. Whether you're at work, at home, or chatting with a friend, the questions you ask can change the course of your conversations and even your relationships. Here's a little challenge for you. Get curious. Just ask yourself this one question this week. What is the one single reason you want to build your communication skills? Answer this question honestly, thoughtfully. And when you do, share your answers by tagging me in your stories on Insta. My handle is #communicate101. You can even drop me an email at info@sarikasingh.in, because I love hearing how these little shifts make a real difference in your communication skills. See you on the next episode of your favorite communication skills podcast, Communicate 101 Speaking Writing Tips. Thank you for listening to this episode of Communicate 101 Speaking Writing Tips with Sarika Singh. If you want to be notified of upcoming episodes, be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow the podcast. I'll be back to share more stories, more life experiences, and more communication tips every Friday. If you want to reach me or connect with me, just put your comments in the comment box below or mail me at info@sarikasingh.in. I know you're going to rate and review this podcast, so a big thank you in advance. Stay tuned and think about what we talked today.